Most people think hunger is something that creeps up on you, a slow, grinding thing that takes days to announce itself, that arrives with warning signs and time to prepare and neighbors still pretending everything is manageable. That's not how it happens. That's not how it happens at all. What actually happens is this. The grid goes down at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, the ATMs are already offline. By Wednesday afternoon, the grocery store managers are on the phone with their regional coordinators being told that the refrigerated trucks scheduled for that morning are sitting idle in a depot somewhere because the automated dispatch system needs power to tell a driver where to go. By Thursday morning, the shelves in 7 of America's most populated, most modern, most supposedly civilized cities are stripped to the bone. And by Thursday night, the people in those cities who assume that food just happens are starting to understand, for the first time in their entire lives, that it doesn't. Here's what nobody in emergency management wants to say out loud. The modern American city was never designed to survive. It was designed to consume. Every logistical innovation of the last 50 years, from just-in-time delivery to centralized cold storage to GPS-coordinated trucking networks, made urban food systems faster, cheaper, and brutally efficient. It also made them dependent on an unbroken chain of electrical infrastructure in ways most residents have never once considered. When that chain breaks, the city doesn't slow down gradually, it seizes, the way an engine does when the oil is gone. And the seizing doesn't take long. The average American grocery store carries roughly 3 days of food inventory under normal conditions. That number sounds manageable until you understand what it actually means. The food on those shelves is not a stockpile, it's a pipeline, a river, not a lake. The moment the trucks stop coming, the countdown begins. And in some cities, that countdown moves faster than anyone expects, because stores were already running lean to cut overhead, because population density means more mouths drawing from the same thin supply, and because panic doesn't wait for the shelves to be empty before it starts emptying them. So let's talk about those cities. Not the ones that will struggle, the ones that will run out. Los Angeles is where the math first becomes genuinely terrifying. The county holds roughly 10 million people, and the food that feeds them flows primarily through distribution centers in the Inland Empire east of the city. When those centers lose power, their automated inventory systems go dark, their climate-controlled storage begins warming, and their loading dock scheduling collapses entirely. The trucks have fuel, they just don't know where to go without the systems that tell them. Picture a single mother in South LA. 2 kids, $40 in her wallet, a pantry stretched to maybe 3 days if she's careful. The nearest grocery store is a mile and a half away. By Wednesday afternoon, that store has a line out the door and a security guard doing crowd control at the entrance. The shelves in the back half of the building are already bare. She can smell something wrong near the dairy section, a warm, slightly sour smell that shouldn't be there yet, and she realizes the refrigeration unit stopped sometime last night. She grabs what she can reach, she goes home. She doesn't tell her kids what she saw in the eyes of the people waiting behind her. Los Angeles has some of the most documented food access gaps in the country, and the grid failure doesn't create that vulnerability, it just removed the last thing holding it back. But LA's problem is logistical. Phoenix adds something far more primal. Phoenix sits in a desert that receives less than 8 inches of rainfall per year. The 4.8 million people living in that metro eat food that arrives almost entirely by truck, because the surrounding land produces nothing edible at scale. Every loaf of bread, every carton of eggs, every piece of produce came from somewhere else, and all of it stopped moving when the grid went down. But the food problem in Phoenix arrives inside a worse problem. The city's municipal water system depends on electrical pumping to maintain pressure. Within 24 hours of a wide area outage, water service across large portions of the metro becomes unreliable. And when water becomes unreliable in a desert city in summer, the human body stops cooperating with calm decision-making. Thirst is physiologically more urgent than hunger. The body signals it within hours. It becomes desperate about it within a day. Think about an elderly couple in a Chandler retirement community. No chest freezer, no stored water, because the apartment is small and nobody ever told them they would need it. By Thursday afternoon, their neighbor is knocking, asking if they have any bottled water to spare. They share what they have. By Friday morning, what they shared is gone, along with their own last bottle, and the temperature outside is 108 degrees and the ceiling fan is just moving hot air around in slow circles, and one of them is sitting very still in the chair by the window in a way that worries the other one deeply. Phoenix doesn't collapse like other cities, it dehydrates first, and the food crisis arrives second into a population that is already not thinking clearly. Chicago adds a layer that neither previous city has, the problem of being a hub. Chicago isn't just a consumer of food, it's a node through which enormous quantities of food move on their way to the rest of the Midwest. That sounds like an asset until you understand what it means when the logistics network goes dark. The distribution infrastructure, the rail yards, the cold storage, the trucking depots is integrated into a digital system. When that system loses power, Chicago doesn't just lose incoming supply, it loses the ability to function as a relay point at all. Food that might have been rerouted from regional suppliers cannot be rerouted because the rerouting mechanism is the system that just failed. The south and west sides of Chicago were already food deserts before Tuesday night. USDA data has documented for years that large portions of these communities have no supermarket within a mile and limited vehicle access to reach one farther away. Picture a family on the south side, a grandmother raising 2 grandkids in a third-floor walk-up. The corner store 2 blocks down went empty by Wednesday evening. She has a half box of pasta, a can of beans, and a window that looks out onto a street that is getting louder in a way she recognizes from decades of living here. A low-grade tension that precedes something she doesn't want to name. She fills every pot and pitcher she owns with tap water while it still flows, because she has lived long enough to know that when one thing stops working, you don't wait to see what else will. What Chicago adds uniquely is seasonality. A winter version of this same failure doesn't just mean empty shelves. It means a food emergency inside a hypothermia emergency, and the people most exposed to one are structurally the same people most exposed to the other. Houston already showed us what this looks like. In February 2021, when Texas's grid failed during a winter storm, store shelves were stripped within 24 to 48 hours. Roads became impassable. Water pressure dropped across large portions of the city. And there was a detail that most postmortems glossed over in favor of infrastructure analysis. In a neighborhood in northwest Houston, people were filming lines stretching around the block at a single gas station that had kept a generator running. 3-hour waits in sub-freezing temperatures for chips and bottled water. These weren't people in a disaster film. These were people in one of the wealthiest metro areas in the United States, less than 48 hours after a grid failure, already doing things they would not have believed themselves capable of 2 days before. That particular transformation from normal person to desperate one took less time than a long weekend. It required no catastrophe beyond the power outage. And it is the detail that every city on this list shares, regardless of geography or season or population size.
Houston's summer version is materially worse. Refrigerated food begins spoiling within 4 hours of power loss. By the time a 48-hour outage ends, the food that was in residential refrigerators and the remaining temperature-sensitive store inventory has largely become a health hazard rather than a food supply. The effective food buffer of Houston and a summer grid failure is not 3 days. It is closer to 1, minus whatever panic buying consumed on day 1. New York City's where every urban vulnerability on this list reaches its logical extreme and then exceeds it. 8.5 million people on islands and peninsulas connected to the mainland by bridges, tunnels, and a subway that stops the moment the electricity stops. The food supply flows primarily through the Hunts Point Food Distribution Center in the Bronx, which processes roughly 60% of the city's produce. When the grid goes down, Hunts Point goes dark. The inventory buffer that existed before Tuesday night gets compressed to nothing within the first 24 hours by panic buying and then by spoilage that begins quietly in every refrigerated unit in every store in all 5 boroughs simultaneously. 30% of New York households have no personal vehicle. Those households are not just experiencing a food shortage, they are experiencing a food shortage in a city they can no longer move around freely. Picture a family in the Bronx. 2 blocks from a bodega already emptied, a mile and a half from the nearest supermarket, no car, 2 kids under 10, and a Metro card that hasn't worked since Tuesday night. The food in their apartment runs out Friday morning. The street outside is loud with something that doesn't sound like normal city noise, a different frequency, higher and more unpredictable. The kids are asking questions she doesn't have answers for, so she answers the easier ones and goes quiet about the rest. And she sits by the door and listens to that street and waits. Miami closes the geographic argument. It is a peninsula within a peninsula. The roads out are limited, the surrounding land is wetland and coastline that produces nothing at food scale, and everything the city eats arrives from elsewhere by truck or by ship. In a regional grid failure, both channels go quiet in the same window. What makes Miami distinctly dangerous beyond the logistics is what happens to information when the power is out. A large portion of Miami's population has limited access to English language emergency communication and the deep historical distrust of official response systems built through repeated hurricane disasters. When the food disappears and the official channels go dark simultaneously, the informal networks that fill the gap are not always accurate, not always accessible, and not always oriented toward calm. Seattle is the counterexample that should comfort you and doesn't. The Pacific Northwest has real agricultural output in the valleys east of the Cascades. It has fishing industries. By geographic logic, Seattle should be more resilient than Miami or Phoenix, except that the Cascades sit between the city and its food supply, and the distribution centers that actually serve Seattle go offline with the grid the same as everywhere else. The wild salmon in the Puget Sound is not accessible to 780,000 city residents without boats, licenses, and the knowledge to use them. The apples in eastern Washington are 150 miles away on the other side of a mountain range. Seattle's cultural reality compounds this. It trends young, urban, and deeply wired into on-demand consumption. Home food storage was never part of the lifestyle, not out of neglect necessarily, but out of a world that never made it feel necessary. That world stopped existing on Tuesday night. Now here is what happens on day 3, because this is where the conversation usually ends and it shouldn't. By day 3, the grid isn't back. The estimate of 72 hours becomes 5 days, becomes we're working as fast as we can. The trucks waiting to restart the supply chain are still waiting because the distribution centers are still offline, and the logistics software still doesn't function, and the fuel depot pumps still need power. The food banks, already at capacity before the crisis, are empty by day 2. The National Guard gets deployed, but deployment takes time, and the Guard's primary function is order, not food distribution. By Saturday, the social media posts that were frightening on Wednesday are something different. The tone changed somewhere around Friday afternoon, and nobody announced it. And the people who didn't prepare aren't angry anymore. They're quiet in a way that's much harder to watch. 2 households, same city, same grid failure. 8 months ago, one family spent a Sunday afternoon and $200 at a warehouse store on rice, canned protein, dried beans, water storage, and the hand crank can opener. Nothing dramatic, 2 weeks of food sitting in a closet, taking up roughly the space of a piece of luggage. When the grid went down Tuesday night, they filled the bathtub with water, unplugged the refrigerator to slow the warming, and went to sleep. Wednesday and Thursday were uncomfortable, they conserved. They didn't join the line at the gas station. By the time the grid came back on day 4, they had lost some frozen food and gained an unshakable certainty about what their next $200 would buy. The other family had been meaning to do that same thing for 2 years. Not out of denial exactly, just the ordinary momentum of daily life, where the urgent always crowds out the important. They were in that gas station line Thursday night. They were calling shelters asking about space. They were doing the calculation over and over of how many more days what they had left could last, and the answer kept getting smaller. The cities on this list are not failing cities. They are optimized cities. They became extraordinarily efficient at delivering food under normal conditions by stripping out every buffer that slowed down the system. The price of that optimization is a fragility that doesn't appear in any quarterly report, doesn't show up in any city budget, and doesn't become visible until the moment the lights go out and the river stops flowing.